All right, Steven Wright, welcome to the show.
Thanks, William. Good to see you. It's been a little bit since we caught up, so happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Before okay, for everyone listening, Steven is technically my friend, but I prefer to think of him as an enemy. No. Okay, Steven, what? Catch us up. What is going on in Colorado?
What is going on in Colorado? So it's mid-May. Typically, in May, every May that we've lived here, it's snowed, but so far we've avoided the snow, and it seems like the weather has actually turned, and it's warm. It's in the 70s and 80s. It's great. We were just in the mountains this past weekend for a wedding that included alpacas, which was also great.
Whoa.
Um, and yeah, we were up in a little town of Carbondale. It was really fun. Other than that, man, just normal life. I work from home. My wife Allie works in several ERs, about 6 shifts a month. We have 2 kids. That's kind of the normal part of it. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So with this kid or these children that you have, I hear that you read them books. Red Pajama Llama. What is it?
Yeah, so one of the favorites is Llama Llama Red Pajama. Yeah. You should actually, when you get off of this, you should YouTube Llama Llama Red Pajama and find the Ludacris version while he raps it on a YouTube video, and that's how we discovered it in the first place. And so then we've actually had 2 people buy it for us, because they knew we loved the song. So yeah, Llama Llama Red Pajama. Go listen to it. It's great. Read a lot of Jesse Bear. What will you wear? What will you wear at night? That's an old one. Um, yeah, a lot of kid books these days. We have a 5-year-old and an 18-month-old. So the content of the books can be a little different since Miles, our 5-year-old, can take on a little more at this point. But some of them are still pretty mindless and just fun to read to the baby.
I love that. I like this Ludacris crossover to kids books. What do you think is like? So what is that? What is he doing with the kids book?
Oh, it's not his book, but there's and I forget the station. I think it's a station out in LA, I believe, that has had several rappers come on and rap this book because of the way the book flows.
Uh,
So for me, I've read the book a bunch of times. I've listened to the song dozens and dozens of times. And so I can't read the book except in the rhythm which Ludacris is rapping the book. So I don't know what it would be like to read the book for the first time without that context, but it just kind of it rhymes really well. There's a good rhythm to it, and so it's just a challenge that when these rappers come on the show, um, they'll say, "Hey, drop a beat, rap the book," and Ludacris happened to be the best at it, which is why his has gone a little more viral than some of the others. And I can't even remember who else has done it, but it's pretty good.
I love that. They're like testing their flow capabilities, their flowcabulary on a
Their
kid's book.
vocabulary.
But
Yep.
and you're saying because the kid's book is like, is it pretty poetic or it's like written in a way it flows?
Yeah, exactly. And the book was popular enough. There's a bunch in the series now, just Llama Llama Red Pajama, and then a bunch of others that go along with it. But I don't want to ruin the end of it for you. But
Oh no, yeah, don't,
you know,
yeah. I don't want my
it's
audience to hate us.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pretty deep, insightful book with lots of twists and turns.
I love that. I've been noticing, like, I follow this guy named Idausa Ness, and he does language learning. He's like really good at learning languages and teaching languages. And his technique is, instead of learning language starting with like words and grammar, it starts with the sounds and enunciation and the flow of the language. So he first has people rap in the foreign language and start there. And it's pretty wild. Just he'll be like, dude, if you can't rap in Russian, he's like, you don't know Russian. It's like, what? So I love that kind of backwards technique. Besides children's books, what are you? What's some interesting nuggets you've been reading lately?
Yeah, so I just started this. It feels old at this point, but I just started reading Habits by James Clear. That's been a popular one for, I mean, a long time. I think the
Mhm.
cover says he sold 4 million copies of it, and I think it was published in maybe 2018. So it's not an old book, but
Mhm.
he's somebody I followed for a long time. I've considered reading it for a long time, and then just never did, and have finally gotten around to it. So reading that currently. I just finished. I've read a couple of sports kind of biographies, one an autobiography and another just a regular biography. The autobiography was with Stephen A. Smith, who is on First Take. He's probably the most popular ESPN personality. He's very polarizing. Most people love him or hate him. I tend to love him. I appreciate just the art and these, what he does. Most people don't like him if they don't like him because he yells a lot. But I don't mind that part. And then the biography I read was called Tiger and Phil by Bob Harig. Love watching pro golf and playing golf whenever I can. Certainly not at a professional level. But yeah, just seeing kind of the Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson rivalry over the years. And both of them were just unbelievably heralded amateurs as they were coming through golf and had crazy success in different ways. And then, probably the two best golfers of the last 30 years. No, not probably. They're the best two golfers of the last 30 years. And probably Tiger's probably the best of all time. Phil's maybe probably a top 5 of all time. And they just happened to overlap with each other. And so it was a fun read. A lot of it I knew. Probably 20% of it I didn't know, so it was fun to kind of get those 20%, that 20% of the content I hadn't been aware of before.
That's awesome. So like, I don't follow golf. So what is like, how does their rivalry look? Like, have they been in tournaments together? And I mean, like, what's an episode where they were playing against each other?
Yeah, so shockingly, they haven't had many duels, which the book goes into. Essentially, Phil's about 5 years older than Tiger. Had won 3 NCAA championships while at Arizona State. He's the last amateur to win a PGA Tour tournament. So so that was like in 91 or something like that. I don't fact check me, but it was early 90s when he did that, and no amateur has won an event on the PGA Tour since then. So he came out, was already competing and winning. Tiger, again, 5 years later, won 3 U.S. amateurs. He went on to Stanford, won a bunch there, and then turned pro. And his career really took off from the beginning. Won the Masters, I think, in 97. Phil at that point hadn't won a major yet. So the majors, just the most popular or the most heralded golf tournaments of the year. There's 4 of them. And Tiger won one within his first year or two. Phil, it took him till his early 30s, I believe, before he won his first one. So Phil was the most decorated amateur of all time. Tiger followed him up and then just kind of surpassed him. And so for a long time, it was a rivalry in that they were the 2 best players in the world, but Tiger was so dominant, really for a long time. And Phil, was kind of playing second fiddle a lot of that time. In fact, he never, as good as Phil was, again, maybe one of the top 5 golfers of all time, he never reached number 1 in the world because Tiger always held that, kind of held that status for that long. So a lot of their rivalry was, I would say, one-sided, but Phil, I mean, even with Tiger being around, has won, dozens and dozens of tournaments. Their personalities are very different. So that plays into it. They're one is white, one is black. So there's the racial differences. Came from very different family backgrounds. They in their primes treated the media very differently. They treated their competitors very differently. So very stark contrast, not just in how much they won or how good they were, but just in almost every aspect of life, which made it a pretty cool read too.
That's interesting. You say they're different, but they both performed at a high level. If you had to describe, okay, first thing you mentioned was personality. So what is Tiger's personality in like 1 or 2 words? And what is Phil Mickelson's personality in 1 or 2 words?
Yeah, I would say, I'll think about like to their prime, because now they're, Tiger's in his late 40s, Phil's in his early 50s. But in that time when they're both coming up, Tiger was this driven, win at all costs, cutthroat, and all he cared about was winning, and he would sacrifice anything else to do that. Relationships, friendships, anything, being cordial with the media, whatever it took to win. That's all he cared about. Phil, I think he cared about winning a lot, but Phil was, way more known for engaging the crowds. Anytime somebody would say his name on the course, he'd give him a thumbs up. Phil was also, and is still this way, I think, much more cordial with competitors. He was doing a lot of practice rounds, a lot of like money games, side games where they'd bet exorbitant amount of money. But Phil was trying to bring people in and have fun with it. He was a lot better with the media from the standpoint of like, he gave better answers. And so, yeah, just, they both, I think, wanted to win, but Tiger's, I guess, desire to win trumped everything else. And Phil had maybe a little bit, more broad look at kind of the profession and not just the wins.
That's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like Tiger is more intense, and
definitely.
I've like never really watched much golf. I've watched a few Masterses every couple of years. The one time I did watch something and I saw Phil Mickelson, he was like, they're like, Phil, do you have anything to say about your game? And he was like, no, but happy Mother's Day. And I was like, oh, what a nice guy. Like, what a stand-up gent. You know what I mean? Like, that was the vibe I got from him. He was like, no, happy Mother's Day.
Yeah. Yep.
What are the four majors? What are the four majors competitions? What are those?
Yep. So you have the Masters. It's in Augusta, Georgia, at Augusta National Golf Course every year. Usually I think it's the second weekend in April. And then this year, right now, actually starting tomorrow, is the PGA Championship. This year it's at Oak Hill Country Club in Rochester, New York. And then I think the next one after that is the U.S. Open. The U.S. Open this year is in LA at LA Country Club. And I'm going to miss the last one on where they're playing it. But the last one is the Open Championship, or the British Open. If you're from this part of the world, that tends to ruffle some feathers if you call it the British Open, when the organizers over in the UK certainly call it the Open Championship. So those are the four. Three of them are here in the States, one of them over in the UK at a rotating course.
Is it at Scotland, or where did you say it is?
Can be, yeah. Scotland, England, kind of all over. Yep.
Okay, I've always heard.
Last year was at St. Andrews, which is the home of golf, one of the most, probably the most prestigious course, historical course there is. So last year was a special one. Tiger got to play in that, and yeah, didn't make the cut, didn't play very well, but he got to go back there and play, which was, I think, something pretty important to him.
Interesting. How's he doing now? Like, is he competing? Is he not competing? What's going on with him?
Yeah, he's tried to compete. He competed a couple times this year. Won at a tournament he hosts, the Genesis Invitational. He played well, made the cut, played well. Then he played in the Masters, made the cut. And then he had a pretty serious car wreck a couple years back. His leg is mangled, and it still kind of is. And so he can still play golf, but he can't walk very well. And so, I got to go to Augusta last year for the first time and watch him play, actually, on the Saturday. And the place is just crazy hilly and lots of elevation change. And so it came the third day, or the third round this year, and he ended up withdrawing because he was in so much pain, and has put out some sort of release, I think maybe 5 weeks ago, where he's just shutting it down, had to have another surgery on that leg, trying to get it to where it's usable. So
yeah, time will tell. What struck you about Augusta? What did you think about, like, the course and the vibe of the place?
Yeah, this is, if you follow golf, the joke is like, the cameras don't do it justice from that elevation change standpoint. And I mean, it's cliche, but it's true. Like, you're there and it's just so hilly. There's so many pretty dramatic holes in terms of, where the tee box might start versus where the green
Mhm.
is. So that was part of it. I the other thing, or one of the other things they're known for is like you can't have a cell phone on the grounds, and if you do, you're kicked out and banned. And so we just, I went with a friend and we just put our phones away. We left him in his car for the day. And honestly, that was just a really freeing experience too. Like just being around, for 10, 12 straight hours, walking around this awesome place, tons of beauty, some of the, most famous golfers in the world, and just a bunch of people enjoying themselves and taking in the spectacle that is Augusta and the Masters. And yeah, a lot of fun. I, hopefully get to go back again one day. For a lot of people, it's a once in a lifetime thing. And
Mhm.
that's why I took advantage of it last year when I got the invitation. Actually canceled my trip to a friend's wedding so I could go do this. And thankfully he's a sports fan too, and I think understood. And we went and visited him and his wife 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. So, so yeah, that's kind of the, you get invited to go and you make it happen kind of no matter what in that case. So I'm sure there are instances or things that would be going on in my life that I would have to turn it down for, but um, but I haven't found that threshold yet.
You savage. I can't believe you said such a terrible thing on a podcast about skipping a no, that's I'm glad he understood
It's
that
what
like
happened.
yeah, it happened. That's how it happened. That it's cool that they don't allow cell phones and maybe in our daily life. Sometimes I like to just this. I'm very often unresponsive on text. So half the time I just leave my phone off somewhere like in a broom closet or something. It's pretty freeing.
Yeah.
Um, so you're not just a golf watcher, Stephen. I don't want to let the time go by without telling people the truth. You, in fact, are or have played or do play a little game we call volleyball.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Not just a golf watcher, but I play volleyball, or I played in college, and try to play a fair amount still, even though now in my late 30s. I can still play it a little bit. So,
Yeah, you're
but
too
yeah,
young, though.
started playing when I was a kid. My high school started a boys team my sophomore year, and I'd always played baseball my whole life growing up, and that was a
Mhm.
spring sport, and volleyball is a spring sport. And I was just very, very mediocre at best at baseball, and for whatever reason, volleyball clicked pretty quickly for me. I played a lot of basketball growing up too, and I don't know
Mhm.
why volleyball ended up being the thing that clicked, but it did. And um, I was on the first ever team at my high school in Middletown, Ohio, and we started a team. The team's still going strong. I went back for an alumni game this year, actually this past March, and got to play against the current team, and that was a lot of fun. I was by far the oldest person in the gym, except for our head coach, who is still the same coach who I had when I started. So kudos to him
Whoa.
for still being there and investing into that program. But yeah, tons of fun. I think it's a sport you can play for a really long time. Obviously, like as your athleticism wanes, it makes it harder to jump and do some of the things that you can do. But it's so far, it's not something where I still can't compete. I can still do it. I can still jump, moving side to side. I can do that a little bit. Um, but it's a game that I think once you develop the skills, especially kind of the ball control skills like passing or setting or how to place a shot, like those things don't really leave you. Um, so even as the athleticism goes down, like you can still be pretty effective and do some damage out there.
I love that. I don't know why I was surprised when you were like, I used to play volleyball. I think I just don't think of volleyball as something people play, but it totally, yeah, it's huge. It's like the Midwest. It feels like Indiana and like Ohio, they're like good at basketball. Is that a correlation or not really? Like it doesn't,
uh,
I would think
to
volleyball would be big in like Florida. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I think you have, especially with like boys or men's volleyball. Like you're right, it's not the most popular sport growing up. Um, on the women's side, it's massively popular. It's one of the most
Yeah.
popular, female sports in the country. you know, the talent of, you know, Division I women's volleyball players is ridiculous. Our women's national team is amazing. But yeah, for the guys, it is more of a niche sport maybe, where it's, you know, it's not basketball, it's not football, it's not baseball, it's not soccer.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, how you get into it, a lot of people get into it different ways. For us, I would say like my three younger sisters all played. So even before my
Mhm.
team or my high school started a team, even before my high school started a team, I was around the game.
Mhm.
Even though my sisters were younger than me, like I started going to their practices, and
Mhm.
I would, you know, be a practice player, you know, and play against them. And so started to play there. But to your point about like geographically, you know, it is huge. I was saying in California, especially along the coast, you know, there's a pretty big volleyball population in Hawaii, Florida. So you think like where can you play beach volleyball as well? Those states, you know, have beach and indoor volleyball. And then shockingly, the Midwest is a hotbed for it. You know, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, especially the Chicagoland area, St.
Mhm.
Louis. You get a ton of really good boys into men's volleyball players from those states and those regions. Um, you know, Pennsylvania, you know, the DC area. So there are these pockets where there just are a lot of great boys and men's volleyball programs, and you'll get some good players out of there. And then I do think like some of the skills, you know, from basketball and volleyball translate, particularly on the
Mhm.
jumping side and kind of,
Mhm.
you know, the just movement. You know, like when you play defense in basketball, you're sliding, you're kind of going side to side a lot, trying to keep a defender in front of you. In volleyball, you're kind of you have to move that way too. It's not a whole lot of all out sprints or
Mhm.
or like long distance running. It's just a lot of like quick, really fast movements, you know,
Mhm.
reactions, and there's a lot of that in basketball too. I do think, and I've said this a lot of times, I think, you know, we see all these like in basketball, we see all these guys, especially on the men's side, like doing these crazy dunks, these awesome vertical leaps. I
Mhm.
really think, and this is maybe just experiential, I think volleyball players actually jump higher on average than your men's basketball player. Um, and yeah, that's maybe for a lot of reasons, but like you're literally jumping. If you're playing all around, you know, on a volleyball court, you're jumping almost every play all the time. You know, I played
Mhm.
basketball my whole life, and I could always jump a little bit. Um, you know, probably a little bit better than average than maybe my teammates. And my sophomore year, like I was playing on the JV basketball team, and I could like barely touch the rim. And I'm
Mhm.
maybe like 5'10", 5'11" at that point,
Mhm.
6 feet. I'm 6 feet tall now. And I played volleyball for 2 months. So I played basketball my whole life, could jump decently well, barely touch the rim. I started playing that first year. I think we started having open gyms like in February or March. And by the end of the season, and so by May, by my birthday that year, like when right as I was turning 16, I could like do a 360 dunk. And it just came from like for that 2 months of playing volleyball and just jumping all the time, like my vertical increased by, I don't know, probably 4 to 6 inches, without trying, without just by playing the sport so much.
Dude, that's crazy. That's like a huge improvement from some other sport to jump. Like that's crazy. That reminds me. There's like this Malcolm Gladwell. Did you ever read the Malcolm Gladwell book when he talks about the soccer players and they played like the Brazilian soccer players who played in like a
Yeah.
little square? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. They play futsal with a smaller
Yeah.
ball and a smaller. Yep.
Yeah, they like played like a condensed version of like the key movement or whatever for soccer. They condensed it down into futsal. And it sounds like volleyball is kind of like a futsal because you're getting lots of reps on the jumping and stuff and it translates to basketball.
Yeah. I think they can certainly translate back and forth. Now, there's a bunch of skills that each sport has in and of itself that don't translate,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, certainly some similarities.
Is the net in volleyball when you I was thinking you jump a lot when you're near the net and you're trying to get it over. Is that the jumping you're referring to, or you're saying all the time?
Yeah, I mean, primarily then, right? When you're on offense, you know, you get a ball set to you, you have to jump to hit the ball.
Hmm.
Or if you're on the other side of the net, you're jumping to block. So if you're in the front row, you're jumping every play. Every play that something's going on, unless there's an ace or something like that. But typically you're jumping every play, or the possibility of you having to jump is always in play. And then as you progress, this isn't so much in lower levels, but as you progress and your volleyball offenses get more sophisticated and things like that, there are times when you can still hit out of the back row. There's just a like a 3 meter line, a 10-foot line that you have to jump from behind. So you can't be attacking the ball while it's at the net unless you just have crazy good hops and you can jump from that 10-foot line all the way to the net, hit it. And some people do. But yeah, there's some attacking still that can be done out of the back row. A lot of times when you serve, you can jump serve. So a lot of people are jump serving. So there's another time you're jumping. So it's just all over. And other than that, it's just all these fast twitch movements to try to react to somebody hitting the ball. You're going one way and the ball gets tipped and you got to kind of stop and go the other way to try to dig the ball up. So a lot of jumping, a lot of fast twitch movements.
Interesting. What is a jump serve? What does that mean?
Yeah. So when you're serving, you have to start from behind the line. You have an option of either just kind of standing and serving the ball from where you are, or a jump serve. The way I would do it is you just you toss the ball, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 feet in the air. And just like when you get a set, you take an approach and you hit the ball. On the jump serve, you're essentially throwing the ball up to provide your own set. You throw it up, usually with a little top spin, and then you attack the ball that way. And you're basically just hitting the ball like you would at the net, but from behind the service line. Just a way to generate a little more power. You generate like a downward trajectory on the ball. So if it goes over the net, you want to dive quickly. And so it's just one of the ways you can, serve effectively.
Okay. I can picture it in my mind now. That's cool. I went to Fiji one time and I was on the beach and these Fijians were like, "Would you like to play volleyball?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. We could hit together." And they were all like, the dude like chucked up the ball and just smashed it. And I was like, they were all like, in Fiji, volleyball is huge. They play volleyball like every day. At least these guys did. And they were incredible. Like they were so good. And he was like, "Yeah, I couldn't get on the Olympic team this year or something." And I was like, oh my gosh, like they have nothing to do but play volleyball. Like that's like their main, they loved it. They love volleyball.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good sport.
Yeah. Oh man. I want to go towards, we've done sports. Everybody gets sports. Let's go and dive into the world of writing and how have you kind of used writing in your life, and where is that skill kind of come out in your life concretely?
Yeah,
And
I think
and related to sports, in relation to sports specifically.
Yeah, I think sports even play a role in that, right? So from a young age, like 3, 4, 5 years old, my mom will tell the story that I didn't want to watch cartoons. I wanted to watch basketball, or I wanted to watch sports, or a lot of my toys weren't really like physical toys. They were like baseball cards or basketball cards or football cards that I would organize and memorize stats and learn how to read players' names and things like that. And so I think part of that, like liking that from a young age, like I read a ton of articles, sports journalists, once I got older and the internet became a thing, like, reading ESPN.com or reading post-game stories all the time. And so I just kind of understood how those things were created because I had consumed so much of it growing up. And so when I was in college, I started out trying to go more of a sports route, but like kind of the sports science or exercise physiology route, and just realized quickly, like, that's just not me. I'm not, a medical person by nature. Like, I'm not all that interested in the science or the physiology. So it's like, well, what can I do? How can I still be involved in sports? And I was introduced to a guy named Tim Glahn. He's probably one of my first impactful mentors. Kind of around that same time. There have been a few others, but he was probably the first one that like started teaching me this how to write and how to um, work in sports on the kind of on the PR side or on the media side, and so he just kind of unleashed me early on. I think my first season working with him, I worked not in writing, but I worked in the football press box at Ohio Northern, and I was just calling out defensive stats. So every time, everything that's happening in every play, a tackle, an interception, a pass breakup, a sack, whatever it was, like I was just calling out the number and the team that was doing it, and he was inputting it in our stats program, and that's what we did. And then from there, he let me start to write some recaps for things. And I think my first recaps for the sports was indoor track and field. So at Ohio Northern, we had a great indoor track, and we hosted like 6 or 7 indoor meets a year. And I was working the event. I was doing things like helping the operations of the event. But after the meet was over, here I was writing, about all of the different ways that Ohio Northern athletes performed well at that event. So whether it was 50-meter dash or the pole vault or high jump or long jump or whatever it was, like kind of condensing that into one story. And so from there, next season was softball. I started writing softball recaps and kind of learning that game, which was very similar to baseball, which I grew up playing. So that one thing just progressed into another. Most of my writing started, I think, kind of on that PR side, where it was mostly like press releases I was writing for our own website, but also for other media outlets that wanted to run our stories in their newspapers or on their, for their sports section of the nightly news. And then from there, I started doing a little writing for our student newspaper, the Northern Review. I didn't do a lot. Some of it I would just do. So when I played, I played volleyball there, like I mentioned, but it was a club program, so we didn't get the same coverage that the varsity programs got. So I, sometimes when we had big tournaments, or we were hosting a tournament, or when we go to nationals or whatever it was, I would just write our own stories and and those would be published in the Northern Review. And I wrote maybe a few columns just like on, I think one of my favorite ones, and I don't know if I still have it or not, but was like just a NBA draft analysis. I used to watch a ton of college basketball, still watch some, but kind of analyzing like the guys getting ready to go in the draft, and then predicting like how well their game was going to translate into the professional game, and things. So I would take on things like that. And then over time, I've had, I've started and closed like several blogs along the way, or just like different writing outlets for myself. And, whether that's kind of just on the opinion side, typically around basketball, I would say the NBA and basketball are probably, my favorite league, my favorite sport to follow and watch. So for the listeners, William and I lived in Burundi together. When we were there, I started a site primarily to keep people back home in tune with what we were doing. And I would write just like updates and, what it's like as an American in Burundi and all these things that we were doing there. Yeah. And then probably the other thing I did, so after that, and I was in that kind of that sports media relations world for 9 years, I left that world and got more into sales and marketing, outside of sports. So, and part of that initial job offer I got out of sports was because of my writing background. I started writing like blogs for websites, but the point was not just to have great content, but we wanted to rank these blogs so that when people were searching for things to do and activities, they would go to our hospitality websites that we were writing for. And so I joke, I had no idea what SEO was when I started, at that company, but now I had to write in a way where SEO, search engine optimization, was going to matter, and we had to get our blogs to rank so that people would come to our clients' websites. And eventually I'm like, you know what? I wonder if I can do this myself. So I started another site, ran it for about 2 years. It was called Perimeter Players. My whole goal was, could I get organic traffic to my website in the extremely saturated world of sports writing, and specifically basketball. So that's what the site was. And it worked, within 6 to 8 months. Like I was focusing on topics that hadn't been written and topics where I knew based on the tools I was using that there was at least some search traffic around, and I was just going to, you know, just do everything I could that I knew how to do from an SEO standpoint to see if I can get these blogs to rank. And it worked, eventually, I remember some of them were just random topics, but over time, I think a year in, I was starting to get, 1,000, 1,500 visitors, organic visitors to the website every month. And at that point I had kind of reached that goal. Also at that point, we were in the adoption process, getting ready to adopt our first son. And it was like, okay, I did what I needed to do. I'm not looking really to make money on this. I wanted to see if I could do it, and I did it. And time is now a little more important, or needs to be a little more reined in, and this is going to be the thing that has to go. So that's what it was. But yeah, some of the blogs were just like, a career arc at that point of Stephen Curry's career, or answering the question, where did Klay Thompson go to college? He went to Washington State. And just kind of writing an article that was full of keywords that would support that premise or that question. And then I started writing, top NBA players from Serbia, top NBA players from Slovenia, top NBA players from Lithuania, and kind of just creating this list. So again, it wasn't necessarily new information. It wasn't like I wasn't going out and doing long form things, interviews or things like that. It was literally just, can I write things that people are going to find? And it worked.
I love that. That's it's hard to do. That's like a huge skill. And I came across something called the keyword golden ratio. And have you heard of this or no?
No, but I've also not really been in the SEO space for a handful of years now. So things change a lot in that space. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on these days.
Yeah. Well, the gist of it was like, you do like basically long tail keywords, and you're looking for something that like people are searching for that no one's created, and it's a pretty small bucket. Like, oh, there's only been 250 searches this month for this long tail. And it's kind of like, the idea was like, create something that is so niche, that is so micro, that it's like, you should be able to rank for this, and then work from there. So it's kind of an interesting take on it. I don't know.
Yeah, it was always a balance of, you want to write things that people are searching for, right? Like, who cares if you're ranking first for something that nobody's searching for? It doesn't matter.
Right.
But, okay, well, how many people are searching for NBA playoffs? Millions of people are searching for that, right? So it's not, you're not going to rank for something like that, most likely, especially at a website of like mine that had no domain authority versus like, ESPN or any other website that's writing about this stuff and has been doing it for 30 years. So it was always that balance of, okay, how many people are searching for it? How, to your point, how narrow is that focus of that keyword, that long tail keyword? What's the competition for that? And is there, and some of this was data driven, and some of it was kind of gut feels, like, can I actually rank for this based on what other sites are ranking for it right now? And if the answer is yes, great, let's write it. And then maybe you write that one cornerstone piece of content, or one longer piece of content. And then how do I write other things that maybe complement that I can link back to? And again, it was all SEO, right? Trying to have the right amount of internal links and external links, and doing some of the technical stuff too, not just the written content, but yeah. And what I know, again, I'm not an expert anymore, but what I know about Google is that they're constantly just trying to serve up the best results for their users. And so yes, SEO is a skill, and there's a lot of technical aspects to it, but at the end of the day, you got to write in a way that people are going to engage with. If not, they're going to come to the site, see that it's not good, and leave in 15 seconds, and that doesn't help you. If you can just stay on for a minute, 2 minutes, and they're reading everything, great. But you have to write stuff that in a way that's going to be impactful, that people are going to get what they're looking for. And if you do that over and over again, you have those people in mind. You tend to have some success in that space.
Yeah. I love that.
We always say, good content is king. Good content will always be king in that space. And Google might change their algorithm, and they might change how they define that. But rest assured, if you're trying to shortcut it, or if you're trying to be spammy, or whatever it is, like you're not going to win that race.
Absolutely. That's like the first, good content. Content is king. Like when I help people buy websites, the content websites, and like the first thing to notice is like, is the content on the website good? And that's like the first filter, because you don't really want to buy a website that's like, if the content's trash, it's just like you're already working an uphill battle. You want to buy something that has like reasonably good content. That,
for sure.
It's like everything in life. Like you don't want to kind of like do stuff like that stinks. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
Fact. So, well, what do you think about catch us up on the latest in sales and leading a team and any I wanted to ask like any high level. I'm doing a lot of cold email outreach right now, so I was curious if you had any points about marketing or outreach that could apply to the audience. I mean, high level tips or principles.
Yeah, at my previous company, our chief revenue officer, anytime he spoke to the entire sales team, it kind of became kind of cliche and kind of cheesy, but he'd always say that, what are the 3 most important words in sales? Pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. And I think the longer I'm in the profession as a salesperson, I think that's just totally true. And, and to couple that with another saying from a different manager there was like, you have to be selling while you're closing. Meaning, we oftentimes, if we see there's a deal that is close to the finish line or something we just want to push across, we can then spend so much time on just that, getting that deal across the line, that we fail to replenish our pipeline, or that we fail to think about the other parts of the sales process that lead to success. And so I think from my standpoint, and the more I reflect on it, it's pipeline, pipeline, pipeline. What are we doing to generate opportunities that I can add to the pipeline, knowing that I'm never, ever, ever going to close 100% of the deals that I open. And I don't think any salesperson will. There's going to be some ratio there that you do sell, or that you do close. And it's going to be different probably based on what you're selling and what that contract value is and how transactional the sale is and all sorts of things. But there's a number there, that a close rate that you're going to hit. And that's going to help you understand, if this is my close rate, then I need to generate this much pipeline. And I know it takes me this many calls or this many activities to get one. That helps me then, and helps, I think, anybody understand, like, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do this week to do that? And then just like trusting that process to generate that pipeline. And then in the same, and this kind of goes hand in hand, but again, I'm no different than most people, where like, hey, this one's close to closing, like, let me stay close to the action here and do everything I can to get this done. But then how do I set up my day in a way that's still allowing me to at least do some prospecting, and making sure I'm still sending out the appropriate touch points to the people who aren't maybe quite as far along in my pipeline yet, and doing all those things. So I think those are the 2 things to think about. Like, what are you doing to build your pipeline? And then, instead of getting so caught up in just the closing, what other activities can I incorporate into my day and into my week to make sure that once I do close this deal, I don't have to start everything from scratch, but I have some other deals that are now ready to kind of be in that, that late stage of the funnel, if you will, and start, driving more attention to.
That's good. Yeah. Pipeline. So when I think about things, I think about like, or at least in my company or where I work with my boss and me and people, we try to do ITF, important tasks first. So within the work day, you need to do like the most important thing first, and continuously be doing the next most important thing. And that's coupled with urgency. Like, that's, it's the thing you need to do next is pretty much it. So when you think about sales and if someone's close to closing, and then the prospecting that you need to do do you think what like which one's an ITF, or like how do you make sure that you do uh, cold prospecting? Like, would that happen at the beginning of the day? Does that happen at the end of the day? Or what do you think is a
Mhm.
schedule someone can stick with who needs to balance these different parts of the pipeline?
Yeah, great question. Um, I think that at least for me, like I'm not the best at this, but I think like time blocking or like scheduling when you're going to do activities, whether it's and not just scheduling your calls or your meetings. Because if you don't schedule, my experience is if I don't put prospecting or pipeline hygiene or whatever it is that I need to do in the to get to those points, if I don't schedule that and block out an hour or 90 minutes or whatever it is, 30 minutes sometimes to
Mm-hmm.
do those things, other things pile up, checking email, trying to schedule new meetings. So if I wanted, if I want to make sure that happens, it has to be on my schedule. And if it's not on my
Right.
schedule, it tends to go by the wayside because everything else will just fill that void.
Mm.
Um, but in the same way, if somebody gives me a verbal, whether via email or on the call, and like that, getting that contract out does become, the important task, right? I want to get
Mm.
that out. I want to get that to them right away so they can sign whatever they need to sign, so that we can sign whatever we need to sign, so that we can close that deal.
Right.
Um, so
I like that. Yeah, yeah. Schedule. You got to schedule it. I've got to do that more. I keep I schedule this with you so it happens, but if I don't schedule other stuff, those things will not happen. They'll get sucked into the day somehow.
yeah, yeah, and just taking, and then in that, like taking ownership of your calendar. Otherwise, other things or people will, take that time if it's not claimed for something else.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I like to look at my calendar. If there are boxes where I see like the ITFs and different things are there, then I'm like, this can go. But if the calendar is just like a mess, it's going to be a mess. So, yeah. Well, dude, Steven, this has been great. I think we've hit a good stopping point, and I want to thank you for coming on.
Yeah, William, thanks for chatting. Thanks for the invite, and yeah, we can do it again sometime in the future.
Sounds good, man. All right, we're out.